Thinking about buying a home in Washington? Well, you may want to hit the pause button because there's some big tax changes coming to Washington state, and we're getting after it right now. It has long been argued that living in Washington state could be more affordable than living in the Portland metro area. Now, Washington is directly across the Columbia River. It's almost considered a suburb of Portland because it is so close. And as a lot of people evaluate making the move to the Portland metro area, they usually ask about the Vancouver, Washington, other side of the bridge area. I mean, it is only over the bridge. There's a lot of factors, which we're not going to get into, about why you might want to choose living in Portland versus Washington and vice versa. But in today's video, we're going to be focused on the proposed changes in tax law that are going into effect in Washington state that will absolutely affect people considering being a Washington state resident over a Oregon state residence. Now, it's very easy for a lot of our clients to come to the Portland metro and explore both sides of the river. In fact, we have somebody coming to town this coming week who's going to be doing just that. And each to his own as far as where they feel like home eventually is. Although they are close in proximity, there are a lot of things that are just not the same, whether you choose to live over the river or in Oregon. But the big one coming up is the changes in proposed taxes, which we're going to discuss further. You need to know about these because if cost of living is going to be a factor for you, then you may want to stick around and learn a little bit more about these proposed tax changes. It's always been thought that it might be a bit cheaper to live in Washington. Is the average sales price of homes cheaper? Just by a smidge. They don't have as much inventory, so there's usually a battle of more competition. They're closely behind Portland's metropolitan average sales price. They oftentimes find that people move over there because there are great schools, cost of living is maybe a little bit less. They have something that we don't, which is called sales tax. And depending on where you live in Washington state, it can be as high as 10% and as low as 7%. But a lot of people argue that if they live in Washington, just over the river, they can drive over the river to buy their goods. Now, some do, some don't. But sales tax is a factor, and sometimes they've got gotchas. You know, you buy a car in Oregon, you're still going to pay some taxes in Washington. If you work in Oregon, you're still going to pay taxes, just like an Oregonian. So be careful on the conception about not paying any of our taxes. However, what are some of the changes that we can expect? Now, Oregon does have an income tax, and it can be anywhere from 7 to 10%. That's pretty hefty, depending on what your income is. So a lot of people argue that you're going to pay more living in Oregon. But as we have stated in this video, there's going to be some proposed taxes coming up that you're going to need to know about that could drastically affect whether that is true. The first tax change you should be aware of is House Bill 2049 is scheduled to increase property taxes from 1% to 3%. That is a tripling of the property taxes in the Washington area. That could mean significant things for people being able to afford housing in Washington state. As it seems right now, they might just be a hair lower than us, but this could actually make it so people cannot afford to buy the same house that they used to in Washington state. As we all know, it's all about those numbers. And while the sales prices might be just a smidge behind the Portland metro area in general, if those property taxes triple like they're scheduled to do on House Bill 2049, that could mean the same house has to compensate in price to lower in order to help a homeowner buy the same house. Now, it may not necessarily lower the sales prices if demand continues, but tripling the property taxes usually means that it jumps affordability up so high that many homeowners choose not to buy in those areas and puts a downward pressure on pricing. I can tell you that in the Portland metro area, specifically Multnomah County, where a lot of people don't want to buy houses or are moving out because property taxes are the highest in the Portland metro. We've got 3 counties, and Multnomah County by far tends to be the highest property taxes we have, especially in areas of Northwest, Southwest Portland, where luxury homes, high-end homes can take a real beating on their property taxes. It can almost make a house unsellable. We have talked to a few homeowners whose property taxes have gone up so significantly that they cannot unload these beautiful multi-million-dollar properties. But imagine first-time home buyers paying 3 times what they should or would have in property taxes, or even people trying to move up or size down. That's the bulk of the market that we deal with here in the Portland metro area, including Vancouver. It is all about affordability. And especially when people make a decision to go up to Vancouver and buy a house, they're looking for affordability. They're wanting more house for their money. Well, this bill, if passed, is going to significantly change whether people can afford their property taxes at the housing prices that they once knew. Could it also cause some of them to sell? Perhaps. If you're not expecting a big jump in your property taxes, it could directly negatively impact you affording the house you own. Another tax that they're proposing is a 6% per gallon gas tax. Now, a lot of people move over the river to live because of affordability, or they want the lifestyle over in Vancouver. But a 6% per gallon gas tax would ultimately affect commuters significantly. Now, it's already tough for commuters who live in the Washington state area, whether it's Vancouver, Battleground, Camas, Washougal, and choose to come over the bridge to work. And a lot of people do. We don't really recommend that because, let's be honest, traffic really sucks. And we always tell people, go experience that traffic once or twice before you make the full commitment, because it's a doozy. Now imagine on top of having a hellish commute, you're paying more in a gas tax. Ay, ay, ay. And, we haven't even gotten into the conversation about potential toll roads, which they have been threatening us in the Portland metro area for a long time. And while they've put it on the back burner for now, what if that in fact too should come up? Wow, that could make it so you are not going to want to work in the Portland metro area or travel across that bridge. So it's really imperative to understand how that might affect you. Now, if you work from home and you primarily live and work and have fun and do all your things in Washington state, maybe it's not going to be a bother. But that 6% gas tax could really affect people who drive a lot, who commute, who travel. It's not a joke. These 2 taxes I've already covered, and we've got a third one to discuss, could really be a bummer for Washington residences. And the third way that is affecting taxes is on payroll and business taxes. So as much as 5%, a proposal on high earners, and a 1% surcharge on businesses, which, as we know, trickles down to higher service costs and lower on the take-home pay. Businesses kind of are the backbone for our area and being able to hire people and offer higher pay. And when you increase the cost for a business owner, it can really affect people who are getting the services as well as the people who work for those businesses. These 3 stacked together could be almost detrimental to the point where we start to see the flow of people going up to the Vancouver area who don't want to have to pay all of this tax that they don't have to pay when they're down in Portland. Now, there's been an argument. A lot of times Washington follows Oregon, Oregon follows Washington. They're 2 Democratic states that are just right next door to each other. And a lot of times things that happen in one state can and will happen in another. But as of right now, Oregon is not choosing to follow suit. So as you're making the choice to either live in Oregon or Washington, one or all of these could drastically affect your cost of living. So Oregon's tax landscape is already slightly advantaged in front of Washington at this time. Now, there's no sales tax, as we mentioned, in Oregon, whereas in Washington state, it can be as high as 10.5%, depending on where you live. For a lot of people, that's on goods and services where inflation has kind of kicked our butts. So a lot of people do choose, if they live close to the river, to come over the river, over the bridges on the weekends to get their services, to buy their goods if they're not going to be taxed on it by living in Washington state. But that doesn't serve everybody, and that is not always convenient for all. So expect, if you live in Washington state, that you're going to pay a lot of sales tax on your normal goods and groceries. Now, when it comes to the state income tax, yes, Oregon has the state income tax above what Washington has. Washington doesn't have one. It can go up to 9.9% here in Oregon. the overall tax burden still ends up being pretty comparable when you are factoring in property and sales tax. So a lot of people who do the math kind of realize, wow, okay, I don't have sales tax in Oregon, but in Washington state, I am paying higher property taxes and I am paying, sales tax. And that, depending on where you're living, can really add up. Now, property taxes, Oregon has an advantage over Washington state. We've actually been just under Washington state's property taxes. And if this proposal for new taxes goes into effect, tripling their property taxes, it is going to make Oregon look far better overall for the taxes that you can expect to pay and the overall cost of living. And a lot of times people don't know about some of these, things and how to weigh them. But in fact, if these tax proposals go into effect, it will absolutely push a ton of buyers out of the realm of moving to the Washington area. So what I would do is keep your eye on the pulse of knowing about these taxes going to effect, because there are a lot. They are substantial. That's not nothing to sniff about. These are going to cause people living in Washington to just pay more in general. And I think my sense is that this is going to kick a lot of people, whether they've bought or maybe are currently living in Washington state, to move to the Portland metro area when all is said and done. Because as you stack up all these taxes that Washington has and is proposing, it is substantial. If you're on the fence about where to buy, I talk to people all the time about what makes sense for them. Everybody's situation is very case by case and different based on their lifestyle needs, their wants, commuting, work, family, all kinds of reasons play into where and why you should live where you live. We're not here to say don't buy in Washington, but it's definitely things to take in consideration as you're making your move. We get calls from people all the time that are retiring to the Portland metro area, or they're trying to assess housing, school, what they're looking for, all of these things. So if that's you, hit us up below. All of our contact information is listed. We love to get the reach outs and would be happy to get on a call with you and go over your options. All right, see you guys on the next video.